Hey guys, welcome to Localite. I'm John Compton. Today we're discussing an interesting topic. It's environmentally friendly, or responsible you may say, gardening and landscaping. And with me is one of the owners of Humble Roots, Drew Merritt, and he's going to talk a bit about what his company does and what their vision and mission is. And we're going to learn all about doing gardening and landscaping responsibly. So, Drew, it's good to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it.
Well, let's start off with Humble Roots. Where did you guys come up with the name? And two, what exactly is it that what does it mean to be environmentally friendly when you're doing gardening and your landscaping? So,
well, first, our name actually came from my wife came up with the idea of having a competition to come up with a name for the nursery because we were having a hard time ourselves, and so she put out a bunch of ideas to friends and family over the internet, and a lot of people came up with some pretty funny ideas and some pretty good ideas, but a good friend of ours out of Portland came up with the name Humble Roots, and it seemed pretty obvious when we saw it, so we chose that.
Yeah.
And then Humble Roots, we focus extensively on native plants of the Pacific Northwest, predominantly in the Columbia River Gorge. So we're working with plant species that are indigenous to this area, that are adapted to the area, so all the extremes, the heat, the cold, the wet, the dry. We've been in business now for about 5 years. We're located just outside of Mosier, about 3 miles outside of Mosier is our container nursery. And then we live another 3 miles further outside of town on 50 acres.
So all of the plants then that you grow are all indigenous to the Columbia Gorge, or is that kind of is that too general of a statement for me to say? No,
that's true. We do work with some plants that are a little further out of that zone, but we focus on plants that are going to be pretty much found in Washington and Oregon for sure, and a few plants from western Idaho and southern BC and that area. But since we do all of our own seed collection and our own propagation, obviously most of our stock comes from this area.
Cool. Well, what about ethically grown? What do you guys mean when you say ethically grown?
Well, ethically grown, by our standards, I mean, just trying to stay aware of the parent populations that we collect our seed from, or our cuttings. There are some plants that we have taken off the land, such as like strawberries and fireweed, things that vegetally propagate very easily, where we were able to dig a little bit and now we can propagate extensively just from dividing that stock. We don't go out into the wild and dig plants. We certainly don't promote that, because our goal is to really get more of these plants out into the world, not so much move them from here to there and certainly risking losing them in that process. A lot of the plants we work with, being on the drier side of the mountains, certainly aren't conductive to digging in the least bit, and certainly don't encourage people trying. Mm-hmm. But so we're just basically just trying to put more of these plants out there rather than just moving them around.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned just a second ago about like gathering the seeds, and how does that all work, and how do you find seeds?
Well, it varies, I guess. As many plants as there are, there's as many possibilities as finding or missing the seed, depending on their dissemination methods, whether they're plants such as, say, dandelions, to use a common example that people recognize, that have the fluffy on the seed head that are going to float away in the wind, or other things like the lupins that are a pea, and they create a pod that's going to pop and explode and send the seed flying in different directions, and other things just like the oak trees that are just acorns that just fall to the ground, and those are pretty easy to find. But a lot of it is kind of going out when plants are flowering, finding a healthy, strong population, recognizing if it's going to be a good year to go back for seed if there's not a lot of flowers or it doesn't seem like they're getting pollinated this year, recognizing that. But then some plants that do die back later in the season, brown out, and are harder to find, we actually have to flag the plants so that we can find them later on when, like, say, the other grass species have grown up around them. But it varies from species to species how we go about collecting the seed. Obviously with the oak trees and the acorns, it's pretty easy to walk around with a bucket and throw them into a bucket. Mm-hmm. Other things, such as the lupins I was talking about, that pop and send their seed flying, you can use netting over the seed, or we do collect just a little bit early, just before they ripen and pop, and then we cure them in a brown paper bag, basically, just in a slightly sunny spot and dry conditions, and as the days go by, as they cure more and more, and you just hear in our living room seeds popping and exploding, and
really
in the paper bags and stuff like that.
Well, what kind of plants then do you guys actually grow at the nursery?
We have.
What are some of the main ones?
I mean, we probably work with certainly we work with well over 100 species in the nursery. Everything from small little creeping ground covers to trees, like I was speaking of the oak trees, other big leaf maples, certainly ponderosa pine, and then everything in between, from shrubs and herbaceous perennials, woody perennials. Well, we try to focus on plants that we think will appeal to landscapers and gardeners that have certain appeal.
Well, good. Well, we're going to take a quick break here, but I've got a lot of questions for you, and we didn't get through half of the ones that I wanted to talk to you about in this in the first segment. So we're going to keep the conversation going. When we return, we're discussing environmentally friendly gardening and landscaping with Drew Merritt from Humble Roots here on Localite. So you guys, we'll be right back.